Hey there, welcome to episode 75 of the Social Business Engine podcast. This is the podcast where I invite leaders from brands across all industries who are excited to share with you how they use social media in their business strategy. I'm Bernie Borges, CEO of Find and Convert, and your host of the Social Business Engine podcast. And I thank you for a slice of your day today. Hey, on this episode, you are going to meet Marcel Santilli. Marcel is the Chief Content Officer for TechBeacon, a fast-growing information hub for technologists and IT professionals. TechBeacon is a property of HP Software. Its editorial mission is to deliver content that challenges readers to be better professionals and to compete more effectively. You're going to learn why HP launched TechBeacon as a standalone hub and how it's building relationships with relevant influencers to become contributors to TechBeacon, and how the strategy is delivering business value to HP Software. Now, this episode is sponsored by my friends at Cision, a leading global media intelligence company. We're going to be publishing another social business journal with Cision that features 5 enterprise-level brands, answering the question, what's working in social media marketing? Now, if you're subscribed to receive our weekly podcast through email, you will be notified when we publish this journal, but you have to be subscribed. So if you're not subscribed to our weekly updates by email, which we send every Friday, the way to get subscribed is you can text SBE Show, and that's not case sensitive, text SBE Show to 38470. Once again, SBE Show to 38470, and you'll get subscribed so that we can notify you when this new journal issue gets released. Now, of course, if you're at your desktop, you can just as easily subscribe by hitting our subscribe page at socialbusinessengine.com. And now, here's my interview with Marcel Santilli, Chief Content Officer for TechBeacon. Marcel, welcome to the Social Business Engine podcast.
Thanks, Bernie, and thanks for having me on the show. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's get right to it. First, let's provide a brief background for the business case for TechBeacon. So let's start with what is it and what's the business case?
Sure. So let me take a step back, right? You think about HP Software. HP is one of the largest software companies in the world, actually a third largest software company in the world.
Okay.
HP Software by itself is the 6th largest software vendor. Wow. And so think about just the number of segments and topics that we cover, right? And so when I first started, the business case began with, all right, are we top of mind among all the audiences and the segments where we operate? And if not, why not, right? And so what we started noticing was, where are our customers going to learn? Because we started with a stat that was really interesting, and I think you probably heard this before, where customers are about 50 to 60% through their purchase process before they contact a vendor.
Right.
And what that tells us is, okay, they're doing a majority of their learning before they even go to a vendor website and, actually download a white paper or a brochure or whatever.
Dr.
Right?
Google.
Exactly. So we wanted to build a place where our customers and prospective customers could go to learn. And if you think about the amount of marketing dollars that a company the size of HP, or spends on marketing and advertising with media companies, it kind of, poses the question, why can't we just build that audience ourselves versus renting it through a media company, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we have the expertise, we have the people. I mean, we have over 50,000 customers just among HP Software. So imagine the network of people within that ecosystem, right? That knowledge that exists there. And so that really is where TechBeacon came from, was, we need to be where our prospective customers want to go for information and really create the type of information that they're looking for to make them better professionals and eventually trust us and want to invite us as trusted advisors in their journey, in whatever they're trying to do.
Okay. Now, Marcel, what is your background specifically? And I'm going to ask you two questions if I can.
Mm-hmm.
Your background, and also, was TechBeacon already decided as a strategy? In other words, did HP Software say, let's build our own hub, our own media property, and then put you in place to run it? Or did you come on board to run it after that decision was made?
I would say a little bit of both. so, HP knew that they wanted to do content marketing. Not that they were not already doing content marketing in different shapes or forms, right? And really, it came out of an event I was speaking at where I was talking about some of the work I was doing previously with IBM, where I built and ran securityintelligence.com, which was a similar hub but focused on security. And they knew they wanted to do content marketing, and they saw the approach that I took with that site, and where a year and a half we went from non-existent to generating millions of dollars in revenue, and tons of traffic as well. So they brought me on, but also they didn't quite have the strategy in place. They knew they wanted to do it. The first thing I did when I joined was actually go through a whole month of discovery, where I talked to stakeholders, everyone from marketing to R&D to people in different business units and different segments, talked to customers, talked to thought leaders and subject matter experts, and figured out what our strategy should be. Based on all that input, and then presented it to our executives and management, and then went from there.
And when you were, I love the fact that you did that discovery. You said for a month, right? A month of discovery, talking to stakeholders. And then when you presented it to executives, describe that process a little bit. Was it one presentation? Was it 10 presentations? Was it an easy sell? Was it a hard sell?
I think you already know the answer to that, but as you can imagine, I wish it was just one presentation, right? But really, it's very complex, because you have a very large organization and you have different stakeholders. And here, we're not just talking about simply HP software. So if you think about just HP software, you have several business units like application delivery management, IT operations management, security, big data, a lot of different business units. So you need to sell that vision to every single business unit. You need to sell that vision to your direct management, and you need to sell that vision to higher ups, all the way up to the highest levels of the company. But then, and on top of that, you need to also play along and get buy-in from the different functions. So you have corporate marketing, you have HP software marketing, you have legal, you have folks that are doing all the social media policy and running social media for the entire company, because you're suggesting opening new social channels. You have legal, because you're trying to open a new site and a new brand, so all of that. So you can imagine how many meetings that involved. And I'll say that was probably one of the most challenging parts of this entire journey. But my approach was really to put together a very limited number of slides and really have a clear vision, and just go with it, right? And kind of do the listening first, and then based on what the stakeholder that you're trying to talk to was saying and what their needs were, then you could kind of tailor your pitch, if you will. Okay,
so imagine that there's some listeners right now that are thinking, this is what I'd like to do at our company. I would like to start a standalone dedicated hub to build thought leadership through content, very similar to TechBeacon.
Mm-hmm.
You've been through this process. What lessons learned would you provide those listeners that they could maybe not fast track it, but maybe avoid some, pitfalls or perhaps mistakes, or again, lessons learned?
Yeah, the biggest thing I see is people go right into the what. And so they start their pitch with, here's what we're going to do.
Before the why.
Yeah, and the why really is about the purpose and selling that big vision, right? That big long-term vision.
I run into Simon Sinek every day. I mean, it's all about the why.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, it's not a science project, and you don't need to turn this into a 6-month learning experience to kind of have something to talk about, right? And you also don't need to go and create 60 slides about it. I had 6 slides.
Okay.
But you do need to talk to people. You need to understand the space. You need to understand your customers. You need to understand what exactly you want to accomplish and where the needs are. And then have a clear vision for how you're going to execute it before you get to the what, right? And the other thing I would mention here is it's very important to get buy-in early on, but you have to find the balance between kind of trying to get buy-in from everyone at your company, and then also just kind of going with it, launching something, and then continuing to get feedback and improving it. And then once you have some results, then you kind of start to expand that ecosystem of people that are backing you, and supporting you. And so I think that's really important. My last piece of advice on all of this would be, really operate as a startup, and so if you think about, like the lean startup, right? And really starting with a minimum viable product, an MVP, and every aspect of what you do, right? So if you're launching a site, really think about the requirements for the minimum you need to launch to go live, and then kind of build up from there a roadmap. You think about your content, do the same thing, focus on one given area, and then build up from there and learn from that experience. You think about your contributors, who you're trying to reach, who you're trying to recruit, who's going to create the content. Again, start small, but execute with speed and excellence, and then build up from there versus I've seen a lot of content marketing programs and content programs out there where, they take like this 6, 8, sometimes even a whole year to launch a site, and then they go to market. And I mean, that whole time you could have been learning from your audience, and you really...
The ship mentality.
Exactly.
Again,
exactly.
MVP, minimal viable product, and then ship. Okay, so you did your discovery, you did your presentations, plural, you've got your minimum viable product, you ship, you're out there. Let's talk about the editorial strategy, because correct me if I'm wrong, but it's really focused mostly, or perhaps not mostly, on contributors, right? And how are you getting those contributors? What role do they play? Are they influencers? Are they up and coming? All the above.
Yeah, absolutely. One piece I think I haven't quite mentioned yet, but I did build a team, and that was kind of in the process a bit after the discovery period. Okay. And that team includes 4 managing editors, a social media manager, and community manager, and then someone that's been kind of serving as a product/project manager, since we were doing all the engineering and design for the site in-house. So that's important, especially in terms of the editorial question you just asked, right?
Okay.
Because a lot of times...
And this team is in-house. These are employees?
Correct.
Okay.
This team is in-house. They're very experienced. One of the guys on my team, Rob Mitchell, he came from Computer World, about 15 years there. Has someone else that came from Wire and CSO Online, and
nice.
And some big brands like Intel and IBM as well. So
nice.
So you put all of that together, and I think by now listeners are probably thinking, well, I don't have this kind of budget, and but let me just tell you, I've also done this where I was the entire team when I was at IBM. And so it's not about the resources you have. It's really about the approach. And also, if you think about how, the cost of having those people in-house versus paying an agency to do 100% of that, that there's a pretty good case to have a good balance there where, a lot of companies, I think they just want to sign a check and forget about it because it's really hard work if you do it internally, And so going back to the editorial, like you said, it really is focused on contributors. And part of it is because I truly believe in building for scale, right? And you can't scale your internal team. So you really want to be able to rely on the insights and the knowledge and the masses, right? So you're almost kind of crowdsourcing your content in a way. And there's a balance between content that you get for free and content that you're actually paying someone to contribute, especially at the beginning stages. It's very important to be able to kind of, in order to get truly quality content. We also work with a lot of writers that will either do ghostwriting. And when I say ghostwriting, it's really about like doing an interview and really extracting the knowledge versus just going off and writing on by themselves and not even remotely sounding like the actual expert, right? And then there's a lot of things that really truly involve more of a journalistic approach where someone's going out there talking to a lot of different experts and sources and putting it all together in a really interesting piece. So we have that as well. We actually even have competitors on the site that are contributors. We welcome that. Part of our editorial guidelines is we're product agnostic and we don't mention products. And the only times we're allowed to mention vendors, is in relation to maybe a stat or a report that's been released that's kind of a industry stat or report. So.
Yeah, and Marcel, I want to point out for our listeners, and oftentimes a podcast listener is mobile, not always, but often they're mobile. So I want to point out, we're talking about a standalone website, TechBeacon.com, and of course, my listeners know that I'll have a link to it in our show notes. But in the upper right of the website is the only place that the HP brand is even mentioned, and it says powered by HP software. Everything else on the website is all about the content. That's intentional, right?
It is. And we're taking a phased approach, and we're truly, I'm a big believer in building trust. And if you have trust as the foundation of everything you do from a marketing perspective or a content creation perspective or really anything you do, then you're bound to be successful long term. And so I think marketing is too self-serving often, and we're trying to change that. We're simply saying, look, what is the type of content that we need, that our readers need on a daily basis? Can we be the best answer to the top questions they have, to the types of things that they're searching for, and simply focus on that in order to build an audience, right? Eventually, we're working on creating long-form assets and things that are going to help us generate marketing responses that eventually can lead into leads and eventually revenue, right? And so that's definitely in our roadmap. But we never want to be self-serving, right? We never want to do that product push where it goes from, you see this type of content all the time, right? It goes, here's your problem, and then it jumps right into trying to close the deal, right? And the solution is buy from us. So we never want to do that.
Right. So, Marcel, you agreed to do this podcast, so I'm going to push the envelope. I don't know how much you can share, but I'm going to push the envelope.
Sure.
I'd like to know more about that roadmap, because when you did your discovery and then you did the pitch to the executives to launch TechBeacon, how much runway did you get? Was it a 12-month horizon, a 3-year horizon? I mean, before you can actually point to revenue contribution, how much runway did you get?
Yeah, we're talking about, I would say, we didn't quite get a, hey, by this date, you either have revenue or you're fired, right, type of discussion. But our roadmap, we're presenting a 2-year roadmap. And we're executing very aggressively against that. Obviously, there's a lot of moving parts. And, if you've ever done any type of project, trying to estimate what's going to happen 2 years from now is just, it's almost silly, right? Doing projections 2 years from now when there's a lot of moving parts, it's just, it's, a lot of things are gonna change, but at least you have a roadmap that you're going to try to follow. And so I can kind of give you an example from what I did at IBM as well with securedintelligence.com. So we began the discovery process around January of 2013. And we launched the site June of 2013. In a year and a half, that's around December of last year when I left, we were the biggest driver of leads for the business unit for IBM Security. And the cost for a marketing qualified lead was significantly lower. At the time was around $26 per qualified lead, versus content syndication and paid media and paid search that were closer to $100. So right there's a cost-saving business case, with very, very strong ROI. And then if you look at the average deal size was a lot higher than the average for the entire business unit, and I can go on and on. In addition to all of that, there was also the audience, right? And so if simply you were paying for that type of attention over 1 million visitors a year, that by itself would cost more than what it cost us to build the program and run it on a yearly basis.
So no pressure, just do it again, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, terrific. So again, for my listeners who, as you know, they can be across a variety of different company sizes.
Yeah.
So, a 2-year horizon for some listeners, Marcel, is just not going to be realistic. But I think the point for any listener in any size company is that there does need to be a roadmap with some runway, and it's not 2 weeks and typically, not even a month or two. There needs to be, I like to say, bare minimum 6 months. The example you gave at your experience at IBM was 6 months to launch it.
Yep.
And then roughly a year and a half before you
Yep.
produce these, really spectacular business results. But again, that's a big brand. So how's it going? Where are you on the journey?
Yeah. And one thing I wanted to add before I answer your question is
Sure.
also around what is your sales cycle like? So if your sales cycle is, 2 weeks or a month even, you're probably in a better shape or a better place to be able to demonstrate an ROI sooner because you're going to get things in, right? And so I remember with the previous program that I was managing, we had up to 6 months, even a year in a sales cycle. So even if we generated 10,000 leads in a given month, it could be up to a year before we actually saw a dollar value that resulted from that and actually had numbers to demonstrate, right? So that's a big factor there as well when you're trying to figure out what are you asking for in terms of of timeline, and then the last point I'll make is also on if you're trying to get your executives to buy into creating content, it's a long-term play, right? And so I always talk about rented versus earned attention and audiences, right? So you can go out and really literally rent attention, right? You can do a native advertising on a media site and boom, you rented people's attention there. But if you truly want to earn, it is a more cost-effective approach, but it is a long-term play versus a short-term. If you want leads tomorrow, then that's not the best play.
Right. Okay, great. And I agree with you on the whole rented versus earned attention thing. It's something that we strive with our clients from the agency side. We actually have a place on our website where we talk about the value of building your own dedicated media channel. So this is, music to my ears.
Preaching to the choir here.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, I'll take this podcast and I'll share it with all of our clients and say, look, this is what HP Software is doing. So, okay, so back to how's it going? Where are you on the journey?
Sure. So we launched about mid-May. We spent about 2 months, equivalent of, I think, 3 to 4 sprints to kind of launch the site and get things going. So fast forward, we're now in August is our third full month of data that we're going to have. We're tracking we've published already 170 articles to date, and we have about 132 last time I checked earlier this week contributors in our network. And about 70% of them are actually external, so they're not HP employees. So in terms of content creation, and actually getting contributors, building a network, we're certainly on track, and things are looking really, really good. In terms of building an audience, I think we're also making tons of progress. And one thing I want to note is I usually take an approach that is almost entirely organic growth. And people might agree or disagree with that, but I've seen a lot of publications where they have plenty of budget and they do kind of like a 50-50 split where for every dollar of content creation they spend a dollar of amplification and paid media around it, right? And so what happens is sometimes there's budget cuts and then you cut that and then all of a sudden your audience disappears, right? And so I truly believe in building things and growing organically, because if you can't grow organically, it's probably not sustainable, and the quality of your content is really not that great anyways. And so 2.5 months in, we're on track to do about 60 or so thousand views monthly already. And if you think about comparing it to maybe corporate blogs across HP, that's already doing a lot. That's already a bigger audience. And so that's, we're feeling really good about that. And another thing that we're tracking right now too is engagement, social engagement. And so we're we're averaging about 100, 105 social shares per article already. And so that tells us that even though we have, 170 articles published, we're already had over 20,000 social shares to date, just from our
Nice.
article. So that means people are reading and then taking that and sharing on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook, right? And so for us, those are really, really good stats, especially when you compare to a corporate blog that lives on hp.com, And so we're excited about that. We haven't quite started the lead gen piece of all of this, and obviously that's a big kind of undertaking, and we're in the process of doing that. What we're doing to change that, though, is if you think about big enterprises, a lot of times what they do is beginning of the year, they ask for budget for all of their content creation and all their marketing efforts for the entire year, right? Like, so they have this checklist, and they're going to say, okay, this year we're going to do 10 white papers, 5 analyst reports, 20 webinars, 5 videos, and 20 blogs, right? Like at least that's what I've seen a lot of times, right? And the problem is they start to develop, they pay an agency, a certain amount, and they go off and build this white paper, put this white paper together, and then 8 months later, they release it, and then they're like, hey, it's not performing well. Maybe we're not promoting it enough. And then they go and pay a content syndication partner to go promote the hell out of that, right? And then they get horrible leads. We're trying to change that by saying, hey, why don't we develop the content first, start with an article, see how it does, and then from there kind of build up a series. And then if that series does well, then we can put it all together, add some things around it, and then launch it as maybe an ebook or something like that. And so that's the approach we're taking to creating longer form assets that will eventually generate leads for us.
Okay. Well, you're off to a great start. I mean, the stats you just shared are really impressive, Marcel. And you mentioned, if I wrote it down correctly, 132 contributors, and I think you said more than half of them are external to HP. Is that right?
Correct. About 68 to 70% are external, so they're not HP employees.
Okay. So how are you sourcing them? And do you really go after influencers in these categories, or how talk about that whole process?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a very balanced contributor approach. So obviously, we want to find the top thought leaders and experts within HP, right? So that's one piece of the bigger pie. The other piece is influencers. We understand, though, that influencers are, one, very hard to find, and two, they usually don't have a lot of time. So we have a handful of influencers that we've tapped into, and that are regular contributors, some not as regular, and they usually submit content themselves. Some of them we actually work with a writer that we have in our network to try to get that content from them. Maybe we do like a 30-minute audio recording and then turn it into an article, and then do a follow-up 30 minutes to review. So we're sourcing content that way as well. Then we have a whole network of people that I don't call them influencers, because in my opinion, influencers are people that are truly, truly influential, which means they have a huge reach. If they don't have a huge reach, I don't quite think they're influencers, even if they're the top expert in a given area, right? Because whatever they say doesn't reach a big enough audience to actually make an impact and influence people, right? And so we have plenty of those as well. So those are people that are experts. They're kind of emerging influencers, if you want to call them.
Okay.
And so those are great people for us, and they're very strategic because you help build someone up, and they're going to be grateful. They're going to continue to contribute, right? Like, if you're able to take someone from simply an expert with no voice, and not a whole lot of online eminence and a strong presence, and you take them to a rock star status, if you will, then they're going to come along, they're going to grow with you, and they're going to be grateful. They're going to be it's just a win-win partnership, right?
Yeah.
So we're building a lot of those folks up and helping them, right? Like, so we help them with their social presence. We help them to be better writers and contributors. We promote them. We promote their content. We help them write better content. And so that's the other piece. And then the final piece of that contributor network is obviously the writers, right? And that's very important for us. That kind of drives the volume. That helps with, you have a good idea on an assignment, and maybe influencers, a lot of times we quote a lot of influencers, so they don't have time to go and spend 5-10 hours writing an article, but they might be okay with jumping on the phone for 10 minutes and giving you a quote, or giving you a quote via email. And that's extremely helpful because the writer can piece all of that together. So we've done that several times, and it's a great way to grow your audience as well, because you mentions those top influencers on your articles, and then you promote it in social media. You get their attention, they retweet, they share, and then you associate your publication, your program with those people as well, even though they're not officially contributors.
Yep. Sounds like the strategy I need to accelerate here at Social Business Engine. Well, Marcel, this is a great story, and what I want to do before I segue to my one thing question, I want to do a little bit of a recap on the story that you shared here today, because it really is compelling, and there's a lot to it. And so let me just provide a little bit of a recap and then fill in any holes that I may have left out.
Sure.
What I heard in your story, Marcel, is that when HP Software decided to explore this, you first looked at the fact that you've got 50,000 customers, so it made sense to build your own property versus renting the audience that's available through third parties. You started with a month of discovery. You did your homework. You sold the vision to the executives. You got with all the stakeholders, legal, marketing, etc. You started with the why, got everybody on board, then went out with the minimum viable product. But you built a team, a professional team of experts, writers, editors, etc., but also have a big focus on recruiting external contributors with a focus on building trust with your readers. You've got a 2-year roadmap, which is really impressive. Off to a fast start, roughly in 2 to 3 months. And you've already got 170 articles published, 132 contributors, 68% of them are external to HP Software. And you're working with a combination of experts, emerging influencers, and some influencers, and already getting, I think you said 60,000 views per month?
Correct.
Yeah. So you're off to a great start. I mean, that's just a fantastic story. And I'd like to check in with you in about a year and then see where you are there. And I think that would be a great revisit on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for our listeners, you can listen to all of this and say, okay, well, it sounds easy enough, right? But to emphasize, it's been a lot of hard work, and
absolutely.
And if thinking about the tools, the people, and the process putting in place, it takes a lot to kind of figure it out, So happy to connect with any of the listeners that are kind of going through a similar journey, and I always enjoy having those conversations. I talk to a lot of those on a regular basis as well, and and I always learn from those conversations as well. So
terrific. Well, hold that thought, because first I want to cover my one thing question. And Marcel, that's where I ask you, if there's any one thing that you could change about the way that business is conducted today, what would that be?
That's a tough one. Okay, so I put some thought into this, right? So mine is probably not as funny and clever as some of the ones you've had on the show here, but but more on the serious side. I truly think businesses, no matter the size, need to start to operate more as a startup, right? And more as a lean startup. And what I've seen, and I've been at 2 big corporations, IBM and HP, but I've worked with smaller enterprises as well. I've worked with a lot of vendors and agencies as well. And I see this across all of it, right? Which is there's way too much creative energy spent on telling people, creative people especially, why their initiative or their idea or what they're trying to do is going to fail, right? And a lot of creative energy defending the whole stay the course strategies and why staying the course is the right way and why you shouldn't take risk and why this or that, right? And so if I could change anything, it would be kind of removing that no mentality or that stay the course mentality where everyone, focuses more of their creative energy towards talking about why that's not going to work versus building upon different people's idea and listening to customers and gathering feedback and validating that feedback and implementing and iterating fast and kind of going to market and putting customers at the center, right? And so that's kind of my my answer to that one thing,
And Marcel, where are you located?
I'm currently in the Bay Area.
So you're in Silicon Valley.
I am.
So no surprise, but I love your answer. Your one thing is that more businesses, regardless of age or size, should operate more like a startup.
Yes,
The Silicon
exactly.
Valley startup mentality. I agree. I totally agree. I love it.
Although I'm pretty new here, so I moved only 2 months ago from Texas. So
I'm going to edit that out. No, I'm kidding. All right,
Yes.
that's fantastic. Well, Marcel, now is the opportunity. Where would you like to send people to online to connect with you, to learn more about TechBeacon? Any place you'd like to send people to?
Sure. So you can find me on LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter as well. So if you want to follow, mention me, and and kind of get my attention, ask any questions. Would love to connect. I have a couple of presentations that I've done in the past that I posted to my SlideShare. So if you connect with me on LinkedIn, there's some of that there. There's a lot of work there already. So if you guys are trying to kind of see a more structured presentation on how I built some of these programs, it's there as well. And then obviously, if you want to see the work, so you see if what I'm talking about actually exists, you can go to techbeacon.com and check out our content. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And then obviously, if you're connecting with me on LinkedIn, always helps if you do a little introduction and say how you found me. That always helps to contextualize it a little bit.
Absolutely. Well, I will have links to all that in the show notes. So, Marcel Santilli, Chief Content Officer for TechBeacon, thank you so much for being here today on the Social Business Engine podcast and sharing your story.
Thanks, Bernie. My pleasure.
All right. Well, before we sign off here, I do want to remind everyone that this episode is sponsored by my friends at Cision, and we are soon going to be publishing the next Social Business Journal featuring 5 enterprise-level brands who answer the question, what's working in social media marketing? And if you want to know when that's published, make sure you're subscribed by email. And if you're not subscribed by email, just text SBE Show to 38470. Again, that's SBE Show, and it's not case sensitive, to 38470, and that will get you subscribed. Or you can just hit our subscribe page on our website at socialbusinessengine.com. And hey, I always enjoy hearing from my listeners. If you have any recommendations for future guests, any feedback, just either tweet me at Bernie Borges, or you can tweet us at SB Engine, or you can follow our hashtag, which of course is SBE Show. And as Marcel just mentioned, you can hit me up on LinkedIn, but do put a little personal note there on how you found me and let me know you listen to this podcast when you send an invitation to connect. I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode with Marcel. And remember to visit our show notes page, as I mentioned, at socialbusinessengine.com. That is going to do it for this episode. Until next time, this is your host, Bernie Borges of Find and Convert, wishing you continued success on your social business journey.